Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are going to be talking all about arms, okay? Everything from exercise selection to form cues, range of motion, tempo, volume, frequency, the mind-muscle connection, everything that you need to know to get bigger arms on your physique, okay? Admittedly, for me, my arms were always a weak point, but I feel like through trial and error, I have finally figured out some ways to get the most out of my arm training, and hopefully y'all can take away a thing or two from this video. Let's go ahead and let's get straight into it. All right, starting off with this first movement here. So I like to get my arms warmed up with just a simple cable curl, tricep pushdown. Nothing too crazy, but I want to take this opportunity to talk about why most people's arms don't grow. Okay, I think the most common cause is simply ego lifting. Okay, lifting too heavy. You got to remember the biceps and the triceps in comparison to other muscles in the body are actually pretty small. They don't require a ton of weights. All right, that being said, you want to limit the amount of momentum that you are using, and in general, keep your elbow as stationary as possible. All the biceps and triceps are doing are extending and flexing the elbow. Bicep curls, people tend to swing the weight and bring in their shoulder. For tricep pushdowns, sometimes people will let their elbow come forward and then they'll use their lats a little bit to get the weight down. So in general, the more stable and stationary that you keep your elbow, the better results that you are going to get. Next thing is going to be changing exercises too frequently. I see this one a lot. Okay, people going in, they're just, slamming whatever exercise is open or whatever exercise they feel like doing. Okay, you got to remember, progressive overload is king, even with arms. I don't think it's necessarily as important as it is for maybe chest, legs, back, but you do want to make sure that you are having some form of progression in your arm workouts rather than just going into them aimlessly. Now, you do want to make sure that you are training through a full range of motion. Full range of motion while keeping the elbow in place. So really squeezing the bicep at the top of the movement, really squeezing the triceps as well. Full range of motion. A lot of times people, they like to cut their bicep curls short. Make sure that you are bringing it all the way down, getting a full stretch in the bicep. Even if it means that you need to lighten the load and use half the weight, you are going to get so much more bang for your buck by going lighter and using a full range of motion than you are by just throwing the weight around, trying to go as heavy as possible. Now, in my experience, arms respond really well to high volume and consistency. The arms are muscles that actually recover quite fast. You oftentimes don't need, the 3 or 4 days that you would need on a leg day. Usually after a day or two, your arms are ready to go, ready for another workout. Personally, I like to do my arms on a dedicated arm day, biceps and triceps, supersetting the entire workout. Now, a superset basically means that I do a bicep exercise, I do a set of biceps, and then I do immediately a set of triceps, back to biceps, back to triceps. Now with arms, arm movements are not very taxing on the body. Okay, they're not very taxing on the nervous system, which means that you are going to need less rest time to feel ready for the next set, which for me personally, I'm doing about 3 or 4 exercises for biceps and 3 or 4 exercises for triceps every single workout. I'm supersetting the entire thing with minimal rest time, and I'm in and out of the gym in about 45 minutes on an arm day. You want to make sure that you're keeping your arm days intense, keeping the arm days high rep, but at the same time using strict form. The only time I'll use any momentum will be maybe on the last set of a certain exercise to try and crank out a few more reps. But in general, you want to make sure that you are training your arms about 2 to 3 times a week. High rep, really squeezing, good mind-muscle connection, strict form, all that good stuff. Now, when it comes to exercise selection, there are a few different ways that you can go about this. In general, a well-rounded arm day includes a few things. First of all, the bicep, it has 2 heads, the long head and the short head. So you want to pick one movement for the bicep short head, which is usually a preacher curl of some sort, or a movement where the elbow is in front of your body. The short head is responsible for the peak of the bicep, or in other words, how tall your bicep is whenever you flex in the mirror. The long head is responsible for bicep fullness, and the long head is targeted when your elbow is behind you. Okay, so maybe on a dumbbell incline curl or a cable curl where your elbows are behind you is going to be targeting the long head. So you want one exercise for the short head, one exercise for the long head, and then I like just a standard, standing curl. So in this workout, as you'll see, right, I did a alternating dumbbell hammer curl, I did a preacher curl, and then I also did a machine, which had my elbow slightly behind my body. Now, the other thing is, you also want to work on your forearms as well, right? The more pronated your hand is, the more forearm you're going to target. Supinated, okay, is when your pinky's up towards the ceiling and your hand is facing the ceiling. Supination is going to be the best way to target the bicep. When you go into a hammer curl, as you saw me doing in this workout, the hammer curl is going to hit the brachialis, which actually sits right underneath the bicep. And when the brachialis gets worked on, it actually pushes the bicep up towards the surface and gives the arm a wider and fuller look from the front. And then if you go pronated or palms down and you do a reverse curl, you are going to be hitting the brachial radialis, which is one of the primary elbow flexors in the forearm. And that's a great way to target almost exclusively the forearm. But it is good to have supinated, neutral grip, and also pronated curls as a part of your workout program for arms. It's only going to make your arms look fuller from the front, from the side. And then of course, you don't want to be neglecting your forearms either. Now, when it comes to triceps, okay, you have 3 heads instead of 2 on the biceps. A lot of times people will prioritize bicep curls too much during their arm training, not realizing that the triceps actually makes up 2/3 of the arm. You have the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head. So for the long head, that's going to be the largest head located on the back of the arm, and any overhead movement, such as the easy bar overhead extension that I did in this workout, or sometimes people will take a dumbbell and take it overhead, or a cable overhead movement, that's all hitting the long head of the tricep. You also want to make sure you're targeting the lateral head, which is primarily going to be targeted with any push down movement. And then the medial head, there's not really a specific tricep exercise that is going to target the medial head, but rather the medial head is active in pretty much any tricep movement. Although generally any dip movement, bodyweight dip, weighted dip, or a close grip bench press is going to really target that medial head as well. But generally speaking, a good arm workout includes an overhead extension movement, a push down movement, and then also a dip or a close grip bench press. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the biceps and the triceps are smaller muscles, which means that they're going to respond very well to slow eccentrics. Okay, the eccentric is the lowering phase on a bicep curl. Okay, really slowing down, trying to resist the weights, or if you're doing a tricep push down, trying to resist on the way up. Okay, most of the muscle damage on any movement, not just arms, comes from the eccentric of the movement. And if you're really trying to induce as much muscle hypertrophy as possible, you want to make sure that you're really controlling the eccentric and trying to connect with the muscle as best as you can. Controlled reps will always be sloppy and heavy reps, but again, partial reps at the end of a set can be extremely useful. Now, of course, I need to mention genetics. Okay, everybody has different genetics for their arms. Okay, some people have shorter bicep insertions, some people have longer bicep insertions, and you can just take a look at your elbow. Okay, and you'll notice that there is a space between your elbow and where your bicep starts. The larger the space between the elbow and the bicep, the shorter of an insertion you have. Generally speaking, people with shorter bicep insertions are going to have a bigger peak, meaning their biceps are going to be more peaked when they're flexing, taller. People with longer insertions are going to have more bicep fullness, which means the peak is not going to be as prominent, but their biceps are going to be looking a little bit fuller. Now, that space between your elbow and your bicep, you cannot build muscle there. Everybody's muscle bellies, everybody's muscle insertions are a little bit different. Some people are just genetically going to have smaller arms. Some people are just going to be genetically gifted with bigger arms. But ultimately, a lot of this just comes down to figuring out what works for you, sticking to the basics, okay? Because a lot of times people will try and get too fancy with their workouts, too fancy with their exercises. Stick to the basics of good form. I find that consistency is oftentimes the biggest indicator of muscle growth when it comes to the arms. A lot of times, guys, one arm day a week is not going to cut it. If you're really trying to grow your arms, I find that oftentimes 2 to 3 workouts per week where you're doing high volume, as soon as those arms are recovered, you are doing another workout. Okay, that's going to be the best way to maximize your arm gains. And by that same token, a lot of times people will do chest and triceps or back and biceps. And the problem with that is when you're doing a chest workout and you're doing your bench press and you're pressing movements, your triceps are already involved. So by the time that you get to your triceps at the end of your workout, your triceps are already mildly fatigued, which means that you're not going to be able to get as good of a stimulus. And that same token goes for back and biceps. Okay, when you're pulling, doing pull downs, pull ups, rows, you're using your biceps in every single movement, okay? So by the time you get to your biceps are already fried. So for me personally, if I will combine my arms with a bigger muscle group, I will do chest and biceps or back and triceps to make sure that my arms are fresh at the end of the workout. However, I do find that a dedicated arm day for 90% of people is oftentimes the best way to grow the arms, especially if you were trying to prioritize arm growth over time. And then lastly, guys, I think the biggest factor here is just training hard and training consistently. Your body will adapt to whatever you have been doing. So if your arms are small and you've been training for a long time, well, guess what? If nothing changes, nothing is going to change on your physique. The best way to do this is to, number one, train hard, guys. Most people go in the gym and they're not training hard. They're on their phone, they're resting. Arms doesn't require a lot of rest between sets. Arms oftentimes respond better to higher intensity, fast supersets. But you want to make sure that every single workout is like that. Every time that you go into the gym and you train your arms, you're going in locked in, okay? Arm day should not be a rest day, all right? A lot of times people will say, I have a rest day, I'll just do some arms. It's like, no, treat arm day like you would any other muscle group, okay? That's gonna be the best way to get them to grow over time. And just keep it simple, guys, all right? Stick to the tried and true tested movements, use good form, connect with the muscle, do it over a long enough time frame, and your arms are pretty much guaranteed to grow. Remember, most physiques are not built from one crazy workout, but rather from years of showing up and just repeating the basics, all right?
All right, everybody, that is going to conclude today's video. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate you. Hope y'all were able to get something out of this arm workout. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.